Well, the sutta I chose for today would be the Yoniso Manasikāra Sampadā Sutta, a sutta that does not get covered often enough. The theme is so prevalent to the practice. In fact, without Yoniso Manasikāra, all our efforts at meditating are futile. But what is Yoniso Manasikāra? We've heard about the Noble Eightfold Path, and within the steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, we come across Samma Sati. Often we translate that as right mindfulness. And over the years I've had many questions. Well, Bhante, what does that mean? Right mindfulness. Could there be wrong mindfulness? Oh yes, I thought you would never ask. Usually the example that I give to people, it's kind of like a shocking image. A sniper, someone who is trained to kill people, has a very powerful, top-level mindfulness. I once heard one such person describe to me how they take the shot between two heartbeats. I had to really pause to digest what they're trying to say, and the level of expertise that this individual has reached. But what is being done within those two heartbeats? A life is being extinguished. That's mindfulness, but is it the right kind? If you've studied any of the teachings of Lord Buddha, you would know that categorically that is wrong mindfulness. But we do that all the time. You don't have to be a sniper to be practicing wrong mindfulness or wrong attention. Just look at your life, your daily life. One of the easiest, or rather mundane examples is, what are you doing with, well, let's start with, what hand do you use to brush your teeth with? When I ask people, they usually are stunned. They're like, I don't know, but whose teeth are being brushed? Oh, yes, right hand, yes, right hand. Okay, what is your left hand doing in the meantime? Most of the time we're clueless. Here's an example for you of wrong mindfulness. Specifically, wrong attention or unattention. So there's a few words here that are being used. When it is wrong mindfulness, wrong attention, Lord Buddha used a term which was unheard of at the time, and that he called Yoniso Manasikāra. Yoniso. Yoniso means not putting it on the root, the thing that deserves the attention. Meanwhile, it's all over the place. Most of our days are spent like that. Tell a person to just sit for 1 minute straight, think about one thing, or look at something, which is a lot easier. But if you've ever done that, it's very difficult. 1 minute, that's too much. I used to get a kick out of children when I used to be an elementary teacher. Don't move, Johnny, for 1 minute, and I'll give you a star. I'll give you this. I'll give you 5 minutes extra for recess. Tempting. They'll sit, but you know, as if, there's like they're moving they're very jittery, as they say, jittery as a June bug. They're moving. What's happening is very similar to what happens on a consistent basis with the mind. So when we are meditating, we need to know what is it that we are placing the attention on. This is key. This morning when you began your sittings, I asked you, check your attitude. What is it that we are sitting with? Is there some kind of an objective? Usually in the form of expectations. Or kind of like praying or crossing your fingers and saying, I hope my mind will be calm today. Or not give me such a challenging time. That's also an expectation. A big one. And then suddenly you hear noises, kids running outside, your body not behaving as you want it to, itching, pain, pressure, and there it is, that memory that you did not invite. And now it's bringing in a caravan of similar ideas and thoughts and memories. And now you're completely off. Gone somewhere else. All these are examples of not placing the attention where it needs to be. So, let me start the sutta first, and I'll because I also wanted to use the whiteboard because I noticed that it's useful for listeners and meditators to kind of make it more tangible instead of just being abstract concepts and things. So, Yoniso Manasikāra Sampadā Sutta, which comes from the Samyutta Nikāya. Samyutta are the connected discourses, linked, connected discourses. And this is from the Mahavagga Samyutta, and it is from the Surya Peyala Vagga. Surya means sun. This one is a group of suttas or discourses that come from the section that is dedicated to the theme of sun, the sun. And you'll see why. And these are kind of like keys, formulaic keys, that the early meditating, or especially the bhikkhus who were experts at memorization, they used to memorize the suttas. So in their mind, to compartmentalize each of these suttas, they had to be given some keys. So the early formulators of the suttas really did a wonderful thing, because they formulated them in specific structure that they could be memorized easily, and especially recited and retained in the mind of the listeners easily. And so it is Sutta number 45.55. So SN, which is Samyutta Nikāya, 45.55. Again, this is also uploaded on the website, so you have the PDF of it there for you. You can print it out, put it on your walls, I don't know what you do. So, Yoniso Manasikāra. Lord Buddha begins the sutta by saying, Bhikkhus, before the sun rises in the morning, get it? The sun? Now you see why. And you're not going to hear the word sun again in the sutta. That was the key. That's all you need. So, bhikkhus, before the sun rises in the morning, it must first be preceded by the dawn. The dawn, which is its forerunner. Before you see the sun rise, the sky is singing symphonies of colors. It's blue, pink, turquoise, different color, purple, yellow, oranges, all these things. And then you see the sun piercing through the horizon, or behind the trees, or behind the mountains. So before the sun rises, there must be dawn. In the same manner, bhikkhus, for a bhikkhu to be developed in the Noble Eightfold Path, he must first precede it all by becoming accomplished in his radical attention, or wise attention, or wise reflection. I want to, before I go ahead further, I want to now address, what is Yoniso Manasikāra, and just write a few things on the board. So, Yoniso Manasikāra, let me just turn the camera here, so as best as I can. Okay, so I'll be all hooked up. My what? Oh, that's fine. Thank you. So, I will be blocking the view. If I do, I'm sorry. So, okay. So, Yoniso Manasikāra it's good that the room is not too big because you can all see. Yoni means a place of origin, the root. Yoni means the root, the origin, where it all starts, the womb, if you will. Mana or Manasikāra is doing within the mind. Kara or karoti, as it's in Pali, or it comes from kiru, the root, which is to do. And mana, he is the mind. So doing in or within the mind. So if you can just look at Manasikāra, it's a fancy way of saying the word attention. Manasikāra by itself means attention. As I was saying earlier, it could be wrong attention, which is dangerous. And that's why we have to be on top of it when we're meditating. As in, are you aware where your mind's attention is? Where your thoughts are? What's coming up and going away? Are you trying to push anything away when you're sitting? The body wants to itch, you want to scratch it, and then you're off. Now that becomes your main focus. Well, where's the attention? That's where it is. It is not on the original, meaning the root of things, which is Yoniso in this case. This was unheard of at the time of Lord Buddha. This was at the crux of the problem. This was the crux of the problem, because there was the attention being placed on the wrong thing. What? Attention on what? Where was it being placed? On wrong view. Things that have nothing to do with cutting you from the cyclical repetition of samsara. Because he was excellent at meditating, and for years he had done that, 6.5 years. And he got nowhere, except for just a lot of frustration, a lot of pain, physical pain. So there was no wisdom. So what was at the core of wisdom? He discovered it's this, Yoniso Manasikāra. Now, I mentioned Manasikāra. So Manasikāra, think of it as attention. And another thing that is useful to know is, sati, right? Sati, I mentioned earlier, it's mindfulness. What is advised is also to be unmindful. You're also encouraged to be unmindful, but of certain things. For example, you get bored when you're sitting. Today, in the morning, you were sitting for about 2 hours or so. Your mind starts saying, okay, I'm tired. Let's go home. Can I look at something else? Can I open my eyes? How about my toes? Can I wiggle them? Oh, can I pay attention to this memory? What is this? What's happening? Your mind is saying, I need to give the attention to this other thing other than my object of meditation, which was metta. Or it could be breath, it doesn't matter. So at that point, what is recommended is to have asati. Sorry, I'm blocking the participants' views here on Zoom. Anyhow, it's being recorded for you from a better angle, so you'll see it. So asati is being unmindful. And yes, we are being encouraged to do that, but towards the 5 hindrances. The things that drag your attention away, take your attention away from your practice proper. Let's say doubt comes in. What is all this? I don't need this. Why am I even here? It's Saturday. Come on. I could go and play tennis or something. What is that? Hindrance. Or, yeah, I think I need to go and have that meal today. Yes, that pizza, that this or whatever. What is that? Kama chanda. That is the desire for sensual pleasures. Or those cars that are passing by, they're too loud. Haven't they had any parents to train them to be better, this, that, or what is that? It's vyapada, ill will. You don't like, you're resisting it. These are all examples of the hindrances, which are our best teachers, not our enemies. You're not out to have a battle, full-on battle with the hindrances. They're there to have us understand where our hang-ups are, where it's kind of sticky, gluey. We need to remove by having less attention given to them and proper attention onto the object of meditation. This is how we will really utilize the Noble Eightfold Path, practice them. That's what Lord Buddha is saying. This bhikkhu needs to have accomplished, achieved perfection of the Noble Eightfold Path. How? Yoniso Manasikāra. So, one better translation, I would say, is Bhante Jnanananda's, late Bhante Jnanananda's translation of Yoniso Manasikāra, which he calls radical attention. Radical because radical means the root. Radical. So remember Yoniso? It's the root. It goes to the root. So if we were to decipher this further, what could the root be? Root of experiencing things. What could it be? Now you need to go into Paticca Samuppada, the dependent, the law of dependent arising, how things are related. Specifically in your own daily life, what happens when you hear that? You heard a voice, a sound. Yes? You have ears, and here was a sound. Because of these two, suddenly there was ear consciousness. There was a sense awareness of the sound. Yes? Because of these three, something happens. There's a term called passa. Passa means contact. Contact. You just made contact with the... Now, the attention has to be, the radical attention has to be on the contact at the moment of arising. Am I going too fast? This is good stuff. This is the Dhamma. We're good? Okay, good. I invite you to play with life. It's happening all the time. I just gave you the snap of a finger, or finger and a thumb. What happened? It's happening all the time, sound. But this is only sound perception, right? Ear, consciousness. But what about your eyes? Over 75% of information comes through the eyes. In our case, as human beings. Imagine, over 70%. How many times do we pause and look at situations and just carefully look and see and look for the contact point? How many times do we do that? We just take it for granted as it is. And we're ready with a storyline to go with it. All along, we don't have any of this. The attention is where? On the wrong things. You're either in the past or in the future. Never in the present. That's why people have a hard time with meditation. Hindrances, remember I said they're not our enemies. Why? Because they're giving us fresh contact all the time. When your knee hurts, when you feel the urge to move your ankle for some reason, or your hand, or your body, or your neck, or your eyes, you want to open your eyes. There was a contact somewhere. Either your thoughts or physical contact happened. But where is your attention? That's the $1 million or $1 billion question. Most of us are practicing unmindfulness, asati. Asati. So I'll pause for now with board. Is this, if there's any area that needs elaborating or clarifying, please let me know. Is this okay? All right. And don't expect yourselves to just get it like, it takes time. It takes time. So please be kind with yourselves. All right, so let's go back to the sutta. So, by the way, when I said about the sun is preceded by the dawn, there's another sutta that comes after this by a few, 45.59. It's called the Kalyanamitta Sutta. You guys know what Kalyanamitta means? Some of you do. It's the spiritual friend. The spiritual friend. Here, Lord Buddha just is saying, just like the dawn precedes the sun, similarly, in order for a bhikkhu to be perfected in the Noble Eightfold Path, he must have accomplished the radical attention. That must show up first. That is the dawn. But in the other sutta, Kalyanamitta Sutta, that I just mentioned, the same analogy is used, the same metaphor is being used. However, in that case, the dawn is none other than a Kalyanamitta. He says, in order for the bhikkhu to become accomplished, become an arahant basically, they must have a Kalyanamitta in their life. And other places, you have Venerable Ananda being asked as to what is the spiritual companion, the spiritual friend, who is, and how much of importance is there. And Venerable Ananda says, it's 50% of the path, half the path. And Lord Buddha says, no, don't say that. Don't say that, Ananda. It's the whole entire spiritual path. Who you're associating with. Your spiritual friend, who is it? That's how important it is. So that's I wanted to mention that because in that case, it's the relationship specifically between a teacher and a student. That's how we start. and how much trust there is, how much Dhamma there is. And if there is, it is fully drenched in the Dhamma, then it is true Kalyana Mitta, friendship. And it's only a matter of time. If the trust is there, the Dhamma is there, it's only a matter of time. And arahantship will happen. Even in this day and age. Even in this day and age. So, let's continue. So thus, bhikkhus, by accomplishing himself in radical attention, the bhikkhu, as a result, is able to both cultivate and develop the Noble Eightfold Path. So, I mentioned about Yoniso Manasikāra, which is wrong attention. Wrong attention. Remember, asati is unmindfulness, but it doesn't necessarily mean wrong or non-radical attention. Because the attention oftentimes goes to, is placed wrongly. Wrongly. Often when I tell people or try to encourage individuals to start the day with gratitude, many have a hard time doing that or processing that because they have more of a love affair with the pointing the finger at themselves, judging, or someone else. That is wrong mindfulness, wrong attention. Why? Because you are not finding yourself or your life to be worthy enough to deserve gratitude from you. I was mentioning something to a similar thing to a student yesterday. I said, when you wake up, because they were saying earlier this week I was curled up in a fetal position in bed, I could not get out. I felt so off, I felt so depressed. But then I said, what did you do? Did you stay there? He said, no, I got out. I said, you got out of the bed, out of the fetal position. Did you do it? I asked, and he's like, what do you mean? Did I do what? Did you show appreciation to yourself to having come out of that state? He paused and he said, no. And I said, how about your legs? Did you thank your knees? Did you thank your feet because they rolled out of bed, you placed your feet on the ground? And you got up. Did you say thank you? See, we think that, the Dhamma is something out there. It has everything to do with your daily life and how well you manage your difficulties. And it has a lot to do with showing appreciation and gratitude, placing the attention on the thing that matters. Radically. Otherwise, the attention is placed on the wrong thing. And what is or are the wrong things? I need to get up again, sorry. All right, so here we go. A lot of going back and forth, so no problem. I'm going to erase the board. Sure. So there are three things. I mentioned them before. They're called the poisons, the three poisons or kileshas. They are at the root of the problem. They are the problem, in fact. Don't try to change the person outside of you because they're not the real defilement, even though we like to think of it. If I could only fix that person over there, my life would be just perfect. If I can only fix my mom, my dad, my partner, my wife, my child, my boss, you name it, then my life will be just perfect. If I can just fix the economy, if I can just fix the climate, this, that, the planet, good luck. Lord Buddha gave us a better shortcut as to what can and really change to improve our life. They're called the kilesas, or kilesas. So kilesas are the defilements. So these are in our heart. These are the things that will drag us from bad states to even worse. Remember, earlier the person I gave the example of was having a difficulty showing appreciation. That person is experiencing the defilements, and there, by the way, 3. One is called lust. Lust or greed. Greed comes in many, many shapes and sizes. It has many colors and flavorings. So this one is called raga. I don't know if raga. This is number 1. Then we have dosa. Dosa is, think of it as hatred. That's one way of looking at the second kilesha. And then the third one, this is a big one. This is the mother of the other 2. That is moha. Moha is delusion and the willingness, the arrogance to stay ignorant, which I call foolish, or even stupidity. The other day I was translating one sutta. I just decided not to use the word ignorance because ignorance is like, yeah, he's just ignorant, kind of like very, harmless. But no. If you choose to stay with kileshas, that means you are very much in cahoots with remaining in that defiled state of suffering. Hence, stupidity. Especially when we have the tools. We have the tools. When I tell people to smile, relax the facial muscles, they go like, as if I asked them to lift a 50 kilogram of dumbbells on both. It's like, take it easy, just relax. Smile, lift the corners of your lips, try it. There's so much resistance. Even though they know it makes them feel good. What is that? That's not ignorance, that's stupidity. Why? Because the person is not finding themselves worthy enough to feel okay. Why is that? Really? So we cannot proceed without knowing as to what is it that Yoniso Manasikāra, non-radical attention or unwise attention, why is it so dangerous? Because it is focusing on these 3. It stays on these 3. It does not want to leave this reservation. It wants to stay here. That's why the person doesn't see themselves worthy of happiness. So many people used to come as a therapist, they would come in and, why do I always make the wrong choices, doc? I was like, well, let's explore that. Let's sit down. Sometimes I would have a diagram, I would just show them something similar to this. And they were like, yeah, I see now the points, now that you draw it like that, I'm seeing the connection. I would have them do journaling things, and all of a sudden it starts to take shape. They start seeing their own contribution of their suffering, for their suffering. That's why Lord Buddha used the word moha. It's not someone else's moha, it is my moha. Because it's my suffering. And guess what? When you have nibbana, it's not someone else's nibbana, it's your nibbana. And nibbana starts with your smile, by the way. It's not that complicated. You don't have to go into a kuti, on retreat for 60 years to get close to nibbana like that. It's every time you let go of your hang-ups, of your attachments, of this is how it's supposed to be. Stubbornness, foolishness, stupidity, moha. So that's one way of looking at the reason why it's so dangerous not to appreciate the real negative presence, the poisonous presence of Yoniso Manasikāra, which is non-radical or unwise attention. So, okay. And how, bhikkhus, can the bhikkhu become accomplished in radical attention, as a result of which he is able to both cultivate and develop the Noble Eightfold Path? So now he's getting, into the mechanics. Here, bhikkhus, the bhikkhu cultivates and develops the right view, which is secured and supported by him secluding himself, as he becomes more and more dispassionate, while his suffering reduces and comes to an end, all of which come to ripen and mature in him as he continues to relinquish and give up. Anytime we're doing something important in our lives, even when we're enjoying something, you cannot do it in a state of being surrounded by noise. Even if you're going to listen to some piece of classical music, let's say, you're invited to go to a concert hall, you go there, and what do with the doors? They close them. And in some places, in some cases, if you show up even a minute after, sorry, you're going to have to wait until there's the intermission. Yeah, but it's an hour and a half later. Oh, yeah, sorry. But why? The noise. People want to really be in that. We are constantly surrounded by noise, however. We see this countless times where Lord Buddha says, when the bhikkhu, when the person, it's not just for bhikkhus, by the way, the monk, for anyone who is trying to gather their thoughts, to practice, go deeper, they seclude themselves. We have become a society that always needs to be throwing itself into the crowd. We like noise suddenly. And in fact, some places people will turn on the music. Or yesterday I was being driven by an Uber driver to go to my cousin's house. Throughout that long 1 hour ride, totally incoherent commercials playing, noise, this and that that do agitate the mind left and right, up and down, sideways. This person did not care, the driver, as to what was playing in the commercials, what they were selling, just the noise. So he doesn't feel like, crawling out of his skin because he's bored with his life. Noise has become so much part and parcel of our daily lives. We think that is normal. No, that is abnormal. So here we see Lord Buddha saying, in order for you to really appreciate right view, you need to, first of all, secure yourself in some state of seclusion. It doesn't say go in for 45 years from now on, just live in a forest or something. No. But every day we need to seclude ourselves. Journaling, I mentioned earlier. So many people have a tough time with journaling because guess what? It forces you to gather your thoughts, to dedicate 5-10 minutes or 1 hour just for you. And sometimes we feel guilty even for doing that, to seclude yourself. Years ago, I used to feel guilty to just go into my room and just meditate by myself because, well, I had to be downstairs helping my brothers and this and that to solve problems. Yeah, but I need this too. I need to really, allow the dust to settle so I can be of better use to the people around me. But especially when it comes to right view. Why right view, by the way? Some of you might ask, what is right view? It's a deep topic, but basically, it is the opposite of having the perverted or wrong view. Like what? Looking at something that is impermanent and expecting to turn somehow into something that is permanent. You see it, you hear it all the time. And they will live forever and ever. Remember Disney? You know? Every song, love song. You look for forever, it's always there. Even as a kid, like, I used to go and ask my mom, like, is there such a thing as forever? You know? Because I lost my grandmother. I was like, come on, I thought it was going to be forever. And then poop, 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 other people start dropping out of the scene, dying. I'm not the same. My body's changing. Meanwhile, deep, deep down, we all are looking for that sense of security, the foreverness. And we will never find it as we look at the things that are impermanent. So where we're looking at cannot have permanency. Hence you see the convoluted, perverted way of looking at that is at the crux of wrong view. That's why we suffer. That's one of them. Another one is looking for something that is pure within the impure. Something that is beautiful. We're expecting to see something beautiful to come out of something that is not beautiful. And this all is tied into our expectations of life. What is it that we really want? Who? I. In the face of what? Life. Life is presenting to me something else than what I expected. And here we see the second noble truth, which is attaching, grabbing that idea that I want this to be different than what it is. Saying no to life. I want to change you, life. Here you go, the fighting begins. Wrong view. Wrong view. And also looking at something that lacks substantiality and expecting it to be what we call it, atta or self. We want things to have independence. Somehow to not be conditioned by other things. But whatever you look at, it's all conditioned. Today, us being here today, right now, has everything to do with conditions. You take out one or two of these conditions, these criteria, the whole thing falls apart. 2 weeks ago, someone was saying, well, yeah, we love each other, this and that. Oh, okay, that's beautiful. But I'm curious. What if he did this? What if she did that? Would you still have the same love for each other? Well, no, you can't say, but that's not going to happen. I say, whoa. Now you happen to have the right conditions for you to feel, this is perfect, yes, we finally got that sweet spot, and that's it. For how long? For how long? Conditionality dictates change. Why? Because it's conditional. But I want you to stay young. I have family members that are really struggling with the patriarch of the family undergoing certain illnesses suddenly. I said, what did you expect? I mean, in the nicest, compassionate way possible. But were you expecting Dad to live, as sharp as ever, forever? Well, of course not. Okay, but how long? Could we put a time limit on that? How long does a human being last? Well, of course I wasn't expecting him to live 150 years. Okay, so where does the shock come in? Where does the surprise part come in? Yeah, but I was not expecting him to have, let's say, this situation. Let's say people I've worked with, let's say Alzheimer's kicks in. Or hearing loss. Or blindness. But I wasn't expecting it to happen so soon. Did you want to get a text or an email first? I'm not trivializing this because this is how ridiculous our own justifications are for our suffering, because we're fighting, and hence the suffering part. We're refusing to see the conditionality of life. It's a very precarious state that we're in, you know. If you just look at our planet, that says it all. We're hanging in the middle of space, where there are no strings attached. Nothing is holding our globe. And it is spinning like crazy. And it's rotating on itself, and it's revolving around the sun at the same time. And that whole thing is revolving. And we here are living our lives and having all these dramas about what should happen, what should not happen. It's very precarious. You take out one tiny little ingredient, one condition, and everything falls apart. Like a deck of cards where you used to build like castles, or remember, stacking them up. Don't touch the tray, don't touch it. That's how precarious life is. Your temperature rises just a little bit and we have to call the paramedics. Twice it happened. I was having lunch with colleagues in the past, years ago, and suddenly I would notice, one time the person was sitting in front of me, and all of a sudden her face turned dark blue, like I was seeing it happen. We were joking, we were laughing, this was years ago. I was a layman then. And I noticed that her lips turned black. And I knew something was wrong, so I got up. Meanwhile, the other friend is still telling the joke. I just rushed and I said, "Can you breathe?" She's like... So I just turned the Heimlich and did the Heimlich maneuver on her, and out comes this piece of thing that she was biting, and it had got caught in her throat. She was choking in front of us. She breathed. Her eyes were, tearing up and all that because of the reaction. A piece of food was stuck, and there goes that life. Conditionality. When you're driving the car, you just make a wrong turn or don't turn fast enough from this divider. What happens? You're going up and down the stairs. You take a wrong step or miss a step. What happens? All your dreams crumble. Conditionality. Not seeing this is wrong view. So do you see the responsibility that each of us has on our shoulder to create this state of understanding first in order for there to be happiness? Because understanding can only be leading us to state of happiness. And happiness can only come out of understanding. That's why when we say this path is based on wisdom, not just blind faith or anything like that, but that understanding can only come from attention, the proper attention on the proper thing. That's why we don't have guru worship. That's why we don't worship the Buddha. We don't worship anything. We practice through understanding. But it has to be real understanding. It's not based on influence. It has to be based on understanding. Yes, the rational mind has a big part of it, but it has to be based on your own personal experience, augmented, supported by the teachings. And that's why I spend so much time on the suttas, because it's all there. Time means very little, because these are all living situations of humans that Lord Buddha went through, and he's explaining. So, the right view, he starts cultivating it while being supported through the seclusion that he gives himself. And with that, there develops within him dispassion. Dispassion towards what? The Pali word for it is viraga. Viraga means also fading away of that passionate state. I gotta have this. Oh, I don't want this. Why is this happening to me? So you develop a little bit more finesse in becoming more tolerant. Yes, you need to protect yourself. You need to make sure that bad things don't happen. You don't take certain steps that lead you to experience unpleasant things. But when they do happen, you don't have those sharp edges about you. Things don't puncture you so easily as they did. You understand that these are all based on conditions. If I didn't take this freeway, this road, if I didn't make this left turn, I would not have encountered this unpleasant situation. Okay, let me make sure I get out of this situation as smoothly as possible without losing myself. So what you're doing is you're moving from a reactionary point of view or reactionary state of affairs to a response-based action. So you're not reacting to things. You're responding. You're taking a moment, maybe 3, just giving yourself a breather. It's like, it's okay. My dad used to teach me to count to 10. I was like, why 10? Can it be 7? No, 10. 10 is fine. That's a tried method, Okay, 10. And I would notice, I would calm down. I would start suddenly, miraculously putting myself in the other person's position, point of view. Suddenly, I was like, but I don't want to be them. Why not? They were in my shoes. Now I could be in theirs. I can look at it from their point of view. No one can have everyone else's point of view, That is, I think, a definition of insanity or being a psychopath or a sociopath. When they start thinking, I know what's best for you. Right? So you have this sense of detachment, dispassion towards things. You're not indifferent. You're very much alive, but the thing doesn't have that strong of a hold that it used to on you any further. This is where a lot of people got it wrong when they would look at an arahant or someone who is perfected in their path. I once had a teacher who would say, well, an arahant, you can call it a Buddhist saint, is someone who doesn't laugh, who doesn't cry. Why? You mean to say they turn into plastic? A mannequin? They don't feel? Is that what it is? So you want me to move from this state of feeling to a state of non-feeling? What's the fun in that? Like, well, what is that? Show me one place in the suttas where Lord Buddha had exhibited such attributes in his character. None. I've translated, I've gone over thousands of suttas. I've never seen one single episode where you see that in Lord Buddha or his disciples. When you pinch someone, there's an ouch. Years ago when I was in acting school on stage, the director, the teacher would say, with every pinch there must be an ouch. That's how we'll know if you're a good actor or not. You don't fake it. You don't you don't go ouch half an hour later. It's immediate. So, of course they feel an arahant, but they are not captives of it. They experience, they're aware. They're aware, they're present. Otherwise, what is this whole business of Yoniso Manasikāra and all that? That's not to turn you into a non-human. You feel, but you are not a prisoner of these feeling or whatever. You're seeing the conditionality of it. There's a whole new vista open. Why? Because you have wisdom, which you didn't before. That's huge. I think once I read, and it was from a poem from the Zen tradition, if I'm not mistaken. Someone comes and asks a teacher, he says, so they say that you're not you're enlightened, you're awakened. Tell me, before and after, what's the difference? He says, before, I used to get up in the morning, in my hut, in my kuti, take the bucket, go to the stream, fill it up, and come up the hill and put it down and use the bucket full of water. And he says, okay, now, after, he says, I wake up in the morning, take the bucket, go down to the stream, fill it up, come up the hill, put it down and use the water. The person says, what's the difference? He says, that's the difference. He doesn't get it. He does, though. The teacher does. It's an experience. It's a personal affair. But it's not a mystical affair either, because ultimately there needs to be an absence of suffering that used to be there. That's why Lord Buddha taught us that there are two arrows that we are struck by. One arrow is unavoidable, and that's the one that we call this human body, birth, and everything that comes along with it. Loved ones, the loss of loved ones, health, this, that. That is unavoidable. If you are born, you're going to face that. It's inescapable. The other arrow, that is escapable. And that's why we practice. Not to get rid of physical pain or death. No. People are shocked when I tell them, as Buddhists, we are afraid not of death, but birth. Because if you're born, oh boy, that's it. You're too committed. You're in. Everything else that comes after birth, you're stuck with that. So make sure you're never born again. People want to be born again. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking. Anyhow, so moving on. Similarly, the bhikkhu cultivates and develops the right intention, which is secured and supported by him secluding himself as he becomes more and more dispassionate, while his suffering reduces and comes to an end. All of which come to ripen and mature in him as he continues to relinquish and give up. This is the last few words, relinquishing and giving up, to constantly do that. That is when you're sitting to meditate, when I ask you to constantly open. Like today I was giving the example of the petals of a lotus. We are so jaded with our interpretation of life and how it's supposed to be happening. This thing called meditation. I know what... No. Stay soft. Stay organic. Always open. Never take anything for granted. Constantly opening. And for that, you need to be able to look at not just this moment as your ultimate reality, but to see and understand that all things are impermanent. Even if your sit is not going so well, your mind is all over the place. Don't just conclude that this is it, this is the best it could be, and that's it, and I'm like, relax. This too shall pass. Why? Because there's this thing called anicca, impermanence. Many people think of impermanence as something bad, always. No, even the pain you're having, and you're trying everything to get rid of it, guess what? You can tell yourself, you know what? You remember that thing that I always have this repugnance, the revulsion towards? Impermanence? That could be here too. Meaning the pain also is impermanent. I would say this a lot with clients that would come in years ago, and just friends and family, who would have what they call it now in therapy, bereavement, loss and bereavement. You've lost someone. They died. After listening to them, giving them that soft space and holding that space for them, giving them lots of love and compassion, you softly bring in the theme that all things are impermanent, including, and especially, the pain, the big hole that they have, the big gash in their hearts. That also is impermanent. And that suddenly I notice often it would give them this sense of like they breathe. Literally. They just take a gasp of air. And they rise by like a few inches and then they sit comfortably into the seat. And I usually point my finger to them and I ask, what was that? And they smile without me saying a word. And sometimes there's tears that follow. Because the person felt what? Mini nibbana. Cessation of pain. Oftentimes people think that the Buddha only gave us one thing, one truth, suffering. No, he gave us two. When you think of it, he gave us 4 noble truths, yes, but what were the themes? The main message. Yes, there is suffering in life, but there's also an escape, an ending of that suffering. That was the ending of the suffering, when the person went, because they let go. That this is the only, I'm the only person that death could happen to, someone I loved that could die. Suddenly they realize, wait a minute, there's about 8 billion of us on this planet. Every single one of us will experience this or has experienced this loss. And in about 125, 150 years, none of the people who are alive will be alive. 8 billion. Just think of that reality. 8 billion people in about 150. There will be new people, but the ones who are alive now won't be. So that gives the person sense of like, okay, I can unburden myself. There you go. That was the second teaching. The ending of suffering. So you don't hold it as this is mine, my unique situation. It can only happen to me type of a story. Similarly, the bhikkhu cultivates and develops the right communication, which is secured and supported by him secluding himself as he becomes more and more dispassionate, while his suffering reduces and comes to an end, all of which come to ripen and mature in him as he continues to relinquish and give up. Today, before lunch, I asked you, when you hear someone speaking to you, or you're engaging in a conversation, please don't place your attention on them, what they're saying. That is not as important as what is happening in you when you are hearing them speak. Even when they're not speaking, the silence. Why are they quiet? What are they holding back? What are they saying? Where is that series of questions coming from? Me! What did he mean by that? Why is he looking at me like that? What did they mean by this? Oh, okay. Most of the time, this is when I used to do couples therapy. I would give couples, assignments, usually. Like, I would get them to have a timer, use their phone or something, and have 1 minute, countdown. So for 1 minute, one of the partners will listen to the other speak. And then I could speak, yes, you can't, but not the way you think. Because everybody is loading up the gun. Right? They're preparing for the attack. Oh yeah? Oh, wait until I promised I will be quiet for a minute, but here it comes. Okay. That's not listening. For 1 minute straight, you will listen to the other person speak. You will never interfere, you will never interrupt them during that 1 minute. You're simply listening. This was like torture, but also fun for me. I would go sometimes to, when I used to do community mental health, people couldn't come in some cases. I would go to their houses, to their home. I would sit there and on their dining table, they're sitting there. Yeah, but you're... 1 minute. And they would have to, okay, and I would have to restart the countdown. Now, once the 1 minute is over, the other person who listened has to repeat what they heard. Fun. I told you it's fun. Because they don't want to listen. You're just, preparing your defense, right? So, the person says, I am hearing you say this. You said this, but you were wrong. No, that doesn't count. You have to exactly say the essence of what they were saying. And then at the end, you need to ask their permission or their concurrence. Do they agree with what your rendition was, your conclusions, your summary? And then one of them says, yes, you got all those right except for that last part. That's not what I was saying. So what the person is doing then is learning the skill to hear and listen, which we don't do now. We don't do that. We have ears, but we don't listen. I don't know why we have ears. It should be turned inwards because we're listening to what's going on between the ears rather than what's outside. So now, once the other person approves of what was repeated, this is what I heard you say, this, and this, and then they say, yes, you're right. Now it's the other person's turn. I would start the clock again, the timer, 1 minute for this partner now. And they will say, I feel this every time you do this, da-da-da-da-da, you da-da-da-da. The other person, if they jump in, I have to stop them. No jumping in, no defending, no nothing. You just pay attention to what they're saying. Listen. And then the other person, I've never seen it being done perfectly the first time around, by the way. This is an exercise that you could use in your own family, in your own home, and even with friends. You don't have to be, marriage or, some type of a partnership to do this. So that, I would say, is how we can add our own motif to the right communication. Because we don't have the right communication with ourselves to begin with. And that's why when we do release the words, Lord Buddha would say it's like the axe in the mouth. The axe in the mouth. It's ready to strike the other person. Nowadays, it doesn't have to be even verbally communicated. Nowadays, many people do it through the method of texting, computers, emails, posting something. What I think the term is, what was trolling? Trolling? Yeah. It's just a communication. It's coming from the kileshas. And a lot of it has hatred, which is dosa. The person is burning inside, so they want to spew that vomit, that pus, that venom out to the other person. Under the belief that somehow by me releasing this, I'm going to end up feeling better. Momentarily, it's going to feel like it is. Lord Buddha describes anger or hatred like that sweet-tasting sting that of a plant, let's say, that has its root all venomous. Sooner or later, that's coming in. You're going to swallow that venom, even though in the beginning it tastes kind of sweet. So carefully looking at. And the same applies here with the right action, because they are part of, and that's why we take the 5 sila. In the morning we took pancha sila. Right speech is here. Right action is here as well. Similarly, the bhikkhu cultivates and develops the right action, which is secured and supported by him secluding himself as he becomes more and more dispassionate, while his suffering reduces and comes to an end. All of which comes to ripen and mature in him as he continues to relinquish and give up. And same thing with right livelihood, which is secured and supported by him secluding himself. And then similarly, the bhikkhu cultivates, and I'm jumping some of the lines because they are repeating, but these repetitions are extremely important. That's why I have them for you. You can read them. and benefit by reading them. That's why I go through the trouble of doing all this, translating every single part of these suttas. So I never put ellipses, dots. That's a huge disrespect towards the Dhamma. Similarly, the bhikkhu cultivates and develops the right effort, which is secured and supported by him, secluding himself as he becomes more dispassionate. Right effort is very much joined with Yoniso Manasikāra. What is the effort? Is it lukewarm? Is it... If you want to run a marathon, your effort has to be reflective of that. Your heart must be in it. I see a lot of people going to work, they go to a 9-to-5 job, and they do it with so much hatred and disgust. Monday rolls around, and they don't want to be in that car, or in the bus, or in the train, and commute. I feel dreadful for them because they hate what they're doing, or they're doing it without commitment, whatever it is. Well, the first effort has to be towards the person in oneself and saying, am I enjoying what I'm doing here? You can enjoy it. Years ago, when I was 15 years old, I was in a Christian, a monastery. I wanted to become a monk, Christian monk at the time. And every Saturday was the day of chores for us. So you didn't know what you were going to get picked up for. So we would be there. It was a seminary at that age. And they would give us, tasks. And one time I got, the first time actually, I got the task of going and cleaning up the bathrooms. I didn't like that. Who would, initially? And I said, well, wait a minute. After the resentment kind of wore off, I was saying, when I go to the bathroom, would I like to be in one that is dirty or clean? Of course, clean. Somebody cleaned it before me then. Aha, this is my opportunity to clean the bathroom for someone else or myself. See, you're changing your perspective. This has everything to do with the other steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, by the way, including right communication with myself. And nan is the right action, now right effort. Because I could have said, no, you have to do it. Okay, you could do that, like the person who goes to work and hating themselves and others in the meantime throughout the week. Just poison. It doesn't have to be. Similarly, the bhikkhu cultivates and develops the right mindfulness, which is secured and supported by him secluding himself as he becomes more and more dispassionate, while his suffering reduces and comes to... Remember, this is key. We don't just practice meditation for practicing meditation. That's too out there. Lord Buddha was very pragmatic. You need to see an outcome, meaning that your level of suffering has to drop. Okay? Again, I'm going to give examples of in therapy. Freud, when I read this, I went visiting in Vienna, his place that he used to, they kind of like, they made it inaccessible, so they have these things hanging, you can't cross them, but you see the couch, the sofa that he would sit on, this and that, it is, his cigar box or whatever, and you have this thing on top, a plaque that said, sometimes Freud would see the same patient 6 times during the week. 6 times? 6 times. And that means, by the way, a lot of money. Psychoanalysis. I've met people who would say, yeah, I've been in therapy for 30 years. Why? 30 years. And why do you have to go so often? Why? Well, because it helps. Well, how is it helping? Is it like a panacea? What is this, a Band-Aid? It needs to give you the tools so you overcome suffering on your own. That's why we practice. We don't just practice for practicing's sake. No. There needs to be a drop-off in the level of suffering, tension, discomfort in your life. And conversely, it needs to raise the level of understanding and wisdom. So you don't end up foolish in the moha category. Where is it? Here. Deluded. No one can remove you from the pain except for you. And that's what this path is all about. And the bhikkhu cultivates and develops the right collectedness of mind, samadhi, which is secured and supported by him secluding himself as he becomes more and more dispassionate, while his suffering reduces and comes to an end, all of which come to ripen and mature in him as he continues to relinquish and give up. So the time we spend in meditation is critical, is very important. So you need to, just like when you go to the gym or you're working out, you need to, or running, we need to push the envelope gently, slightly. If you can do one push-up, you need to start to push a little bit so you can be able to do 1.5. Or if you're able to run 0.5 kilometer, pushing gently, gently, gently to get it to 2 kilometers. Similarly with meditation, if you can sit for 5 minutes, pushing it gently until it becomes 10, 15, 20, 30, 1 hour, 2 hours. Because in about 1 hour, things are just getting interesting. And then I see people getting up and say, okay, that was my sit for today. No! It just got juicy. This is the right time. Like, are you kidding me? Sit a little bit more. You know? Or like you're about to bake something and you need to warm up the oven. You warm it up and then you turn it off and then you turn it off and, you know, make the recipe, I guess, for souffle and you put it in there in a cold oven. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. While you throw yourself out back into society, into your busy life, and expecting that 1 hour to have done the job. No, if you're benefiting from something, don't leave it half done. This is your life. So if you have the room, the capacity to push it gently, do it. Bhikkhus, this is therefore the manner in which the bhikkhu becomes accomplished in radical attention, Yoniso Manasikāra, as a result of which he both cultivates and develops the Noble Eightfold Path. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So I hope this was also for you an interesting sutta. Because Yoniso Manasikāra is oftentimes not talked about. And remember, the attention, what I did not mention is before attention we need something else. Interest, desire. I have had in the past a friend of mine at the time, who would say, you Buddhists don't like desire, don't want to have desire, you want to eliminate desire. Well, life depends on desire. I say, there's no such thing as you have to eliminate desire. Me being here visiting your home right now to see you has everything to do with desire. Lord Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree to attain Nibbana had a lot to do with desire. It's what we do with that and when we let go of that desire. One time I was teaching, giving a Dhamma talk in Los Angeles. I was a layman at the time, and someone asked me a similar question, and I said, how did you get here? He said, what do you mean? I said, how did you get to this temple? He said, I walked in. I said, before that, let's break it down incrementally. Well, I took my car and brought it here. Okay, you got out of the car and then walked up the stairs to get to the door, and you walked in, and then you sat. Yes? Before the car being parked, what did you do? I drove for half an hour to get here. Okay. Before that, I was in my house. Okay. So at your house, you decided, I have the intention now to go to the temple to listen to a Dhamma talk. And then you had the desire, you got the key to your car, you got down to the parking lot, you drove, etc., etc. You came here, you took certain streets, certain freeways, avoided others, and got here, parked the car, got out, came here, and sat. A series of desires. Where are they now? Are you carrying still those desires over your head? He said, no, of course not. Why? Because they did their job. They did their job. Lord Buddha in the, I believe it's in the Alagadupama Sutta, the water snake Sutta discourse, he discusses, he uses a lot of metaphors, so water snake is one. He talks about the raft, the boat. If you're going to cross a flood, a huge, wide sea or wide river, you cross it with the help of a boat or a raft that you construct. Even if you can't find a ferry, a boat, whatever, you build one. You cross it, make it safely to the other shore. What do you do with the raft? Leave it. Otherwise, it would be stupid of me to carry it over my head up the hill. Why? It served its purpose. Similarly with desire. You came here because of that desire. So Lord Buddha never said desire is bad. We need to use it wisely. So, if you have the wrong desire and yet you want to have the right attention, they don't work. So they have to be in resonance. They need to match. So if your desire is to come here, let's say, or to sit at home only so that you can show someone else that you have sat, or go on retreats, people do this all the time, and then tell their friends, oh, I sat at a 10-day retreat. Yeah, I didn't speak a word. Okay, the wrong intention, the wrong desire is there. The intention might have been right. I don't know. Maybe that was also convoluted. But they need to match. So, before Yoniso Manasikāra, there needs to be wise, radical reflection. It needs to have the right desire. Otherwise, you will want to move from your sit. The desire to even sit for 1 minute extra has to be legitimate, and it needs to be strong enough, valid enough for you to be convinced to sit. So you need to convince yourself with the right desire, and then have the right intention to maintain that. So, I'll stop here for any questions online or here in the room. There's 2 online arenas, I think.
Thank you, Bhante, so much for that. That's wonderful. So for those who are here in person, if you have any questions, you are welcome to ask those questions directly, and also there's pieces of paper and pens. You can just pass them around. And you can write your questions onto the pieces of paper and pass them to me, and I can facilitate the question and answers. For those who are joining us online, feel free to ask your questions by unmuting yourself, or you could also pop the questions into the chat. Now, Bhante, I can see the Metta Centre chat, but of course I can't see the one over there. So if there's any questions there, please.
I'll check. None as of yet.
As of yet. Okay. I have 2 questions here already.
Oh, okay.
So, ready? Or would you like to have a moment?
I would like the students to see you as you're, unless you mind.
Oh, I don't mind. That's fine.
Okay.
Yes. Hi. Welcome to the Metta Centre. Okay, so Bhante, the first question. Earlier you were talking about guru. So the question is a guru not essential on the path to awakening?
No.
Okay, great. Second one.
They're not essential. In fact, it's a major hindrance. Because what we have today is a culture where people are worshipping the teacher. Lord Buddha was against people worshipping him. And this was the king of the Dhamma. He said, no, why are you worshipping me? What's wrong with you? This bag of filth, he actually says those words. Bag of filth, bag of excrement, bag of bones. What are you worshiping? And if it's a legitimate teacher of the Dhamma, they will not have you be a student, a perpetual student of theirs. The goal of a bona fide teacher is to help the student become a teacher of themselves. That's why we only have one teacher as far as I'm concerned, Lord Buddha. And he, if he were alive, he would actually probably correct me and say, no, the teacher is here to be discovered by oneself. Because as the kileshas I was mentioning are in the heart, so is Nibbana, waiting to happen. So by being, servility is one of the things that have to be gotten rid of in order for a person to go from even a state of anagami to arahantship. They need to relinquish 6 things. Lord Buddha says this in the Book of the Sixes in the Anguttara Nikāya, the numerical discourses. But I see this a lot. Even monks, Buddhist monks, mostly Westerners, I have to add, come to Asia, and they now, my mom used to say, to run away from the rain only to get caught in a hailstorm. That's their attitude. They just drop their Western cultural nuances and now become overly worshipful, servile. So this whole guru business has nothing to do with the Dhamma as far as I'm concerned, as indicated by the teachings, by the suttas. So that's the footnote to the no.
Thank you. And is there another way that we can approach people who, not necessarily as a servant to the guru, but if we see the guru, say, as a teacher, as a guide, as someone who has gone further on the path to lead us, would that be a good relationship with them?
The guru word itself doesn't exist. The guru is a Hindu concept that came in, Brahmanic concept. I have never come across it. But I see that now, especially after Buddhism or the Dhamma spread throughout Asia. In some parts, it took on the colorings of those regions, those cultures, some of which had already established itself deeply in the guru ideal and that hierarchy. So that is my concern, because what happens, intentionally or non, is the student starts to look up to the teacher constantly, like this, to the point where they stop seeing the errors in the teacher's behavior. See, the teachings that come out of the teacher's mouth have to match their behavior. In therapy, we have a saying, trust the behavior, never the words. What we have today is a blind belief in the teacher. Again, that's why I'm very cautious in the way I answer that question. But if I remove those parenthetical umbrella of a guru and just look at a teacher, of course we need teachers. I happen to be one, and I have students, so I help. But ultimately, we're all students of the Dhamma. And the job of a teacher is another point that often gets to be neglected or completely avoided, is this effort at constantly trying to be popular, to be appealing, to become agreeable, which is one of the biggest problems in today's age, why also the Dhamma is suffering tremendously. It is dying. The teachings of Lord Buddha are dying. Why? Because it's being watered down. Because the teachers of today they're doing backflips simply to please the audience. They don't lose supporters. They're telling jokes, for example. In a Dhamma Desana, they're telling jokes that's a Rajneesh method, technique, like Satguru method, which has nothing to do with the Dhamma. So the popularity contest that's going on among bhikkhus today, it's terrible. I think I might have said, I don't know if I said it here, but I said it in a different retreat while here in Australia. One time, years ago, after a Dhamma talk, a gentleman approached and he said, I was a layman then, after the talk he said, you know, your talks are very nice, they're very informative, but could you lighten up? I said, what do you mean? He didn't use the word lighten up, but essentially that's what he was saying. He said, could you be more, could you tell more jokes? Could you say more funny things? And I said, do you want me to be entertaining? Because he gave an example of a famous Ajahn, who will remain nameless, but I think many people know. But anyhow, he said, can you be like him? He tells jokes, he's got so many followers, he's got this, he got huge temples, monasteries here and there. Can't you be like him? He's very engaging, he's very interactive, he's very entertaining. And I said, excuse me, Lord Buddha was never entertaining. That was never the goal. That, unfortunately, is the thorn on the side of Buddhists today in the world. Not just Buddhists, the truth, the Dhamma. And I see again and again, students are being catered to by teachers who are afraid to say the wrong thing so that they don't lose one or two students or multitudes. To the point where we have been, you know, like mum's the word when it comes to crucial points that have been happening for the last 3 years. It's like we're sitting in the room with not just one big elephant, several elephants in the room, and we're just pretending that they don't exist. We're just like, yes, yes, avoiding the entire elephant. That's what we have today in the Dhamma circles. We owe it to the Dhammas for posterity, for it to grow, to say what these robes should represent. We are representing Lord Buddha. We have to say what needs to be said. And let the pieces fall there where they may. But people are too concerned about their image. The Dhamma has to come first, not the person. That's why we don't have our unique look. The hairstyle, this, that. No. It's like, yes, strip this down. It's just like, okay, wear the same thing. Why? So you don't have that extra individuality to protect. So we need courage. So any student who finds a courageous teacher like that, whose essence is all about the Dhamma, then by all means. But ultimately the teacher's job is to point back to the Dhamma, not themselves. I know of one teacher who refused to have a Buddha statue in this well-constructed Dhamma hall. That he spent no amount of dollars, basically, he didn't spare, rather, any amount just to have it be done the way he wanted it, minus the Buddha statue, or an image. But he did go through the trouble of placing at least one picture of him in a beautiful frame inside the Dhamma hall. That's dangerous. So the student has to be aware, and they have to be scrutinizing, as taught by Lord Buddha in Sutta number 47 from the Majjhima Nikāya, Vimansaka Sutta, the examination, examining the teacher discourse. So it behooves upon the student to not maliciously to scrutinize, but to look. To look. Because the teacher is extremely important. This is also trying to answer your question. The teacher's role is extremely important. If they are emulating the example of Lord Buddha, as seen in the suttas, and then the student can become inspired enough to carry on the message. That's why we have 2,600 years later, the Dhamma. It's all because of those teachers behind us. That's why I'm able to I've gone through sitting at the feet of many teachers. They've helped me grow, but ultimately it was going in and trying to take the best of every single teacher, but mostly from Lord Buddha himself. So yeah, the teacher is extremely important, but the student can never be on the passenger seat. of their spiritual path. They need to take responsibility by seeing and saying. I once was a Kappiya to a Mahatera, and I was having major issues with what I was seeing because the behavior did not match all the metta conversation that I was seeing, the instructions. There was a psychosis, there was a schism in my head because it didn't match. This is at the basis of narcissism, toxic relationships. I began to doubt the reality I was being privy to. Until one day, out of the thousands of students he had, I went and said, Bhante, thank you for everything, but I have this problem. It's bugging me. I cannot stand it when you mistreat people like this because they say or don't do what you want them to. You can't do that. If I'm wrong, please tell me. I really want you to correct me because this is tearing me apart. The ego was so strong. So don't be fooled by the robes, by the status, by the celebrity status, or how many followers. Your teacher has to be Lord Buddha himself. Number one. And if you're lucky enough to find an actual living, breathing teacher, especially in robes, who's not compromising, please listen to them. But that doesn't mean relinquish your responsibility and just, I'm going to blindfolded be, follower. No! You are on your path. The teacher is on his path or her path. That's how I would answer that question.
Thank you.
There is a question, I think. Can we alternate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Was there a question here? I thought I saw a hand. Okay. All right, so let me read it out loud. Thank you. This is from Matthias in Finland. Thank you, Bhante. I wanted to ask about how to approach disturbing dreams or nightmares. I managed to have some slight sati to recite some of the refuges in a dream last night as an aid to face some scary dream. First of all, that is huge. To be able to remind yourself to chant or to remind yourself of the sarana, the tisarana, that is amazing. Because that means you have sati, even in your dream. That is very good. So first we have to acknowledge that. And I need you to acknowledge that too, Matthias. Next is, now more awake, I wonder if I could be more compassionate and accepting for whatever there was present in the dream. Already I think I addressed it. If you acknowledge the fact that, wow, a year ago or 10 months ago, or 1 month ago, if this were to have happened, I would not have been able to have the sati and only realize what happened in the morning. So, but that's not the case now. I have had sati in my dream. So acknowledging that, it's like a father or a parent looking at the child who always did something wrong, let's say. Out of 10 things would be wrong. They come back and they say, Dad, I did 5 things right. So if you're a healthy parent, you're going to go and celebrate the fact that this child did 5 things right. So the mind is very similar to that. Think of the mind as a child and talk with the mind. So continue doing this, and next time I would recommend, instead of the tisarana, you can also do the precepts. Reminding yourself of the precepts, because as your practice goes deeper, you will be able to say, let's say something happens and it's out of character. You say, excuse me, I take the first precept, I cannot harm or kill. Or I take the third precept, I cannot engage in any sexual misconduct. In your dream. And that means your sati is now becoming mahasati, which is extremely important because it will take you to panya and mahapanya. And that is how we end up having right view, capital R, capital V, which means that the person is now a noble disciple. So, because wherever you go, sati is now over here, sitting on your shoulder, and the other shoulder has wisdom, inescapably. So, and maybe on a side note, if you are eating too much food at night, or watching something disturbing, or the news, or social media where there's a lot of bad things, or communicating with friends or individuals on a certain theme that might irritate you, those can also be contributing factors. I don't know if you're doing that, but just be mindful of those. I hope that answers that question. So yeah, please be compassionate towards yourself. Tina?
Yep.
Yeah.
The next question is this. In the sutta, the seclusion the Buddha talks about, is it physical seclusion or seclusion from the hindrances?
Oh, lovely question. In the Nalanda Sutta, which we didn't cover today, which is what we see Venerable Sariputta approaching Lord Buddha, and in his appreciation and respect for Lord Buddha, he says, Bhante, there's never been a Buddha like you, in the past, in the present, or in the future. So he goes into these accolades. And Lord Buddha, being Lord Buddha, scrutinizing even his next in command. Basically, Venerable Sariputta was second in wisdom, only to the Buddha. He turns to Sariputta and says, Sariputta, it's interesting. Have you by any chance met the other Buddhas of the past? How about the ones in the future? How do you know if their attainments were as good or better or not as mine? So it's a wonderful challenge. And Venerable Sariputta says, Bhante, that is true. I don't have the ability, I don't have the Dibba Chakra, the divine eye, to go back in time or in the future. I don't have that. He says, that is true, Bhante. But, he says, I can tell you from my experience of this teaching that I get from the Noble One, Lord Buddha himself, that he narrows it down, he delineates it beautifully. He says, my conclusion is that the Buddhas of the 3 times, past, present, and future, must follow this schema, this structure. The first is to overcome the 5 hindrances. Second, they must be anchored on the 4 satipatthanas, the Chatu Satipatthana, 4 foundations of mindfulness. That means observing the body, observing feelings, observing the heart or the mind states, and observing phenomena and relationships of phenomena, hindrances being one of them. And then that's the first. Second, and the second was the Chatuma Satipatthana, the mindfulness. And then the third one is they must cultivate and develop the Satta Bojjhangas, the 7 factors of awakening. That must be there, he says. So that is how I would approach answering that question. And it is double-pronged, just like the question. It is not either or, it is both. Physical seclusion is a must. But even more important is, it is there for training. The physical seclusion is just there for training. Just like you sat today. You're secluding yourself physically, even though you're amidst others. But this is training. Your life cannot possibly be just a matter of sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting. That's unhealthy. You need to go back to life. You need to go and engage. But this is your training, just like the seclusion, the physical seclusion that was referred to here. Because ultimately it is the seclusion from all that noise I was mentioning earlier. Not to be shaking, not to be reactionary. So long as you're lost, not secluded from all that's going on, you will be sucked in, whether you like it or not. Your attention will definitely be, sooner or later, Yoniso Manasikāra, if you have not secluded yourself for a certain time during the day. That's why I'm not a believer in spending hours and hours and hours in a day sitting. One teacher I used to associate with used to say, no, you have to increase more time, more sitting. Well, I used to sit 6 hours. I think once I sat 8 hours, but that was nothing more. Well, now the doctors have said, if you sit over 45 minutes, your blood clot, I have blood clots now, your blood clots are going to get worse and you're going to die. Plus, I cannot sit as beautifully and as long as a rock, a boulder, a mountain. Last week I was at the Blue Mountains. There were many, many beautiful boulders. They have been sitting there for ages. No wisdom will come out of that, sitting. So by sitting itself, no miracles are going to happen. No wisdom is going to come out. But this is not to undermine or say sitting is bad. No. Sitting is important, but in the right dosage. Majority of it, your practice has to be dynamic. And when you have time to sit, please. I encourage students, sometimes they're in the kitchen, they're washing the dishes, or they're changing a tire or something, or gardening, suddenly, or working in the office, suddenly they just go, there's a strong equanimity. And they come, Bhante, should I, please, if you have the time, take the day off, or go sit for 5-10 minutes. Leave the garden, go, actually sit under the tree, in the garden, somewhere. Absorb in that beautiful, that's a gift, that quietude. So that will become a beautiful marriage of both the physical seclusion and the seclusion from the hindrances. Because your practice has gone so deep, because the hindrances will not remain hindrances. They are your best teachers in that sense. Because you have learned how to, nicely work with them, dance with them in your mind, so that you can use the energy. Just like if a rocket is going to be shot out to another planet, to save fuel, what they would use is basically they would go rotating around the moon, our satellite. So after 1 or 2 turns, guess what? You've developed a momentum, centripetal force. So now, once you direct the nose of the vehicle towards a planet or a star, you use the energy of the hindrance, in this case the moon, to go zapping through the sky without extra fuel needed. The hindrances do that. So, but you need both. Does that answer the question?
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
But this sutta talks about Yoniso Manasikāra with respect to the Noble Eightfold Path. There are other suttas where he talks about appropriate attention with regard to the Four Noble Truths. And obviously it's all interrelated. Would you like to comment on that a little bit?
Well, that is true. Lord Buddha was a master at presenting the Dhamma in such a way where you could pluck out one principle from a certain teaching that he gave at a certain time, and then you would put it somewhere else. Let's say earlier I was mentioning about the metaphor of the dawn that precedes the sun. And you saw how the dawn, the image of the dawn, was used in this case for Yoniso Manasikāra, which is radical attention. But a few suttas afterwards, in the Kalyanamitta Sutta, he removed the Yoniso Manasikāra, and then he put in there Kalyanamitta, which is the spiritual friend, with whose help you can develop your practice. And it works beautifully. So similarly, with your question about Yoniso Manasikāra, now it's Yoniso Manasikāra, it's a different, it's the opposite. So it's the object in this case, instead of Noble Eightfold Path, he's talking about, in your example, about the Four Noble Truths. Yes, and by the way, the Eightfold Path, Noble Eightfold Path, is the fourth Noble Truth. It's the Magga, the path. It's the how-to, the step-by-step. that is necessary for a spiritual path to truly be called spiritual path for me. I've never seen it anywhere else in my studying of religious disciplines. I tried. I kept banging my head against the wall, like since I was a kid, trying to find a tool, a step-by-step series of steps. If I follow, I would get to whatever, without blind faith, without guesswork, no gambling. So you have this methodology, the formula that works beautifully. Other places you will find him talking about Yoniso Manasikāra in terms of Iddhipada, which are the four bases of psychic power, psychic success, spiritual success. That's another way of, I mean, it's in that sense, it could easily work. Also, if you replace Yoniso Manasikāra with, let's say, he talks about samadhi, other places, just samadhi. He doesn't talk about it while using the word samma samadhi or sati or vayama or the effort, but you can easily use these interchangeably, so they work. I don't know if I'm answering your question in a satisfactory way, but that's what, or how I would approach it. It's, of course, if you don't have, this takes us back into what I was saying in regards to right view. Meaning, if we were to use the Four Noble Truths, based on your example, while looking through the lens, the goggle of Yoniso Manasikāra, then you will be able to truly understand what right view is, because you're using right view, to look at the first noble truth, which is dukkha. This is one crucial reason why most people will not attain, or will not even come close to understanding the Dhamma, because they are running away from dukkha, from suffering. Today's world, we're being taught to avoid the pain at all costs, run away without understanding, without appreciating suffering. So Yoniso Manasikāra would help the person to develop a healthy appreciation of suffering. This is not you being sadistic or masochistic, neglectful of your well-being. No. Most people run away from suffering. Yeah, well, how in the world is suffering going to teach us anything? You're going to fall into the same trap again. Earlier I was talking as a couples therapist, people would come, or even individuals. They would say, why do I always attract the wrong person into my life? And they would list their boyfriends or their girlfriends, or whatever. And you see the common, denominators. It's all there. And then there was this person and that person, and this decade it was this person, and they all have the same, like 90% of the qualification. This person has never truly looked at the pain they were experiencing, and instead they were always looking away, to run away from pain. So in that sense, Yoniso Manasikāra forces you, because you're looking radically. Where? At the root. Radical. Yoni. What is the root? Running away from one thing into the arms of another thing, which is far worse. Right? Earlier I was telling you that metaphor that my mom used to use, running away from the rain only to get caught in a hailstorm. Oh, the next one, the next partner, the next person, the next job, the next marriage. Yeah, but you had 5 failed marriages over there. Yeah, but the next one is going to be great, doctor. Why? Why? Oh, because you thought it, you willed it, you intended it. That's why? There's no lesson that has been learned. So, Yoniso Manasikāra forces the person to look at the suffering square in the eye, as they say, with responsibility, with wisdom. That's what Yoniso Manasikāra also indicates, by the way. It shows that there is appropriate amount of sati and sampajanya, full understanding of the situation. This is you not reacting, this is you responding. Here's an example of that. You're responding, which is a mature attitude, which we're lacking in our society. Oh, take this pill, you'll get over the pain. Oh, just go on the, go to Fiji, you'll forget about the pain. Go do this, you'll forget, Friday night, oh, let's go to the pub or the club or this or that. We'll forget about what happened. Why do I want to forget? I need to learn what were some of the steps I took that got me into that trouble. Because it forces the person to have wisdom to look now beyond dukkha. So dukkha is the way to nibbana. It's not the way to, it doesn't have a detour sign. It needs to show us where our misconceptions are. So it is a great teacher. Dukkha is a great teacher. So, which causes us to ask the second question. Well, where is this suffering coming from? I'm not able to ask that question if I don't have Yoniso Manasikāra. Because if my attention is on the wrong thing, meaning I want to run away to Fiji, let's say, to forget about what happened, debacle that happened in this relationship, what am I doing? I'm putting my attention on the wrong thing instead of looking at the radical problem. Do you see how we need to apply Yoniso for Manasikāra in our approach of the Noble Eightfold Paths? So if you have that, then sooner or later you will definitely see, because the person who sees suffering for what it is will most certainly see the cause of it. This is something that people don't talk about. An appreciation of the Four Noble Truths. See, the Dhamma does not reveal itself or does not happen just like that. It's not a matter of going through the jhanas, boom, 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 and becoming a sotapanna. No! You need to understand the Four Noble Truths. These are not like some psychic states as like, oh, I'm seeing some lights. No, it has nothing to do with that. There's no evidence of that in the suttas to designate a person as a seika, as a noble disciple, as someone who has seen the Dhamma, Dhamma Chakku. Jnana Dassana it's called. Knowledge and vision of what? Some weird psychic phenomena in your brain? No. There's a deep penetrative insight to things as they are. Yatha bhutang pajanati, Lord Buddha says, to be able to see how things come to be by you for the first time ever. That's why there is a personality change. So I don't believe in these retreats that people go to and then just come out like sotapannas and sakadagamis, where there is no personality change. I used to ask these questions. If this person now is in the 5th jhana or in the 4th jhana or a sotapanna, how come I'm not seeing their behavior reflecting that? Behavior, trust the behavior, not the words or who they have around them. Or how people are saying this person, oh, he's a great teacher. Well, why? If he is or she is, that's fine, that's great. Let me also practice to see if that, and when you practice and you see the Dhamma being deeper than that, some jhanas and this and that, so you will be able to see the cause of suffering. So now you will become, it's almost like a chemist, it's almost like a scientist. That's why I describe meditation and working with the Dhamma like mental surgery. Not brain surgery, mental surgery. because your touch has to be superb. You have to balance wisdom. You have to balance understanding. You have to go into the suttas, you go deep into the suttas, and not just read a few lines. No, really take your time, settle in. See if what this is being said here in this line, whatever, sits as you sit. Does it change you? Does it change your relationship with phenomena, with whatever you've been going through? And does it make your pain less? Through understanding, not by you running away. That is key. Because it's through you understanding that you're going to taste the third noble truth, again with the help of Yoniso Manasikāra. So oftentimes I say, you need to hold the hand of sati. If you say that in a different way, it means holding the hand of Yoniso Manasikāra. Imagine you have a child, your only child, you love so much, and you're going through a crowd. That was my nightmare when I was a child. My mom used to take me to grocery shopping, and there would be people all around. People yelling, people, tomatoes, cucumbers, onions, watermelon, da, 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 da. People would be yelling. People would be, right, especially when the vendor would bring a new case of, a new chest of like new products, and they would dump it on the thing, the display, and all these women would just go to get this. And if you have a child and you're not holding their hand, so my mom used to hold my hand, and if she couldn't, guess what? My hands were there to hold her skirt. I still remember she had a black skirt. I used to hold it like, you imagine my height then. She wasn't tall. She was only like 5'8", 5'7", I'm sorry. I would hold her skirt like this. I didn't want to lose her. Can we hold Yoniso like that? With every single interaction you have in your life, the mind, the contact I was saying, passa, you have 6 doors. 6 doors, the eyes, the ears, the tongue, the nose, the body, and the big one, the mind. Right now, it's annoying, right? It's piercing through the ears. Bhante Nyanananda would call the most interesting, the most powerful musical instrument is the eardrum. The eardrum. And that's where the contact is happening. But there's a reaction to that. So if you have Yoniso Manasikāra, you will pierce right through it, cut straight right through it. It's like a hot knife, metal knife. And you put it on a bar of, a butter, stick of butter. It just goes whoosh. That's Yoniso Manasikāra. It cuts through straight, sweetly, beautifully, through all this other stuff that you have been telling yourself. Why? With the help of clarity, which comes through wisdom. Wisdom in the sense of sati and sampajanya. Sati means mindfulness, and sampajanya means clear understanding. Starting from your sitting position right now, do you know understanding could also be fully getting the grasp or comprehension of how I'm sitting? And while you're sitting, whether or not something is going on in your mind, are you truly present? Are you 95% here or 95% out? Or are you too busy translating or interpreting or having a position towards what I'm saying, putting it in its appropriate boxes as you deem fit? That's what we do most of the time. That's why we have to sit before a sutta. That's what Lord Buddha did. And that's why whoever did that beautifully, correctly, their mind was just like beautiful dry sponge that you toss into a bowl of water. It will soak it up. That's why you had so many arahants simply from listening to the Dhamma talk of Lord Buddha's. We don't have that because we have other stuff in here. And similarly with the Yoniso Manasikāra, when the person is having that understanding, they can see and they can relinquish the hold they had on that position, which is Nirodha, which is the cessation of the suffering. And then the fourth one is every single, which is today's theme of Noble Eightfold Path, every single one of the Noble Eightfold Path has to have within it Yoniso Manasikāra, because you're going to break down from one to the next. You might be okay with the right view, or you might be okay with the right speech, but that will only be temporary, because there's a disconnect between that and the first, meaning right view. Or the other ones are okay, but when it comes to right sati, there isn't Yoniso Manasikāra, which is equivalent to saying you don't have sati at all. So that's how I would approach.
Thank you very much, Bhante. I think what I take back today is that what I hear is that the teacher is really here, or the teacher is actually here. You have the Buddha as the teacher, but then ultimately, that teacher in the Buddha will be here. Am I right in saying that?
Yes. But it doesn't happen in a vacuum, which means we support that principle by exposing ourselves to the teachings which come to us through the suttas. That's why we need to really throw ourselves into the ocean of suttas. You don't need to know all of them. Like we read in this morning's reciting so many texts means nothing. You might know very little. Chula Pantaka was considered dumb. He was a monastic, he was a monk. He was considered dumb and imbecile, basically, because he could not remember a single stanza, a single verse of the teachings. His brother, Mahapantaka, was an arahant already. His brother used to look down on him. But Lord Buddha saw that he was ready. And he gave him a tool, just a piece of cloth for him to rub against with his fingers. And just say, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, you're getting cleaner, 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 cleaner. And the opposite was happening. Got dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. And he saw that it was his contribution to it that was making it dirty. He pierced through the kilesas. A person who was, the effort has to be there, but the teaching also. So we need to tap into the teachings. Not commentaries, not my interpretation of the teachings either. So my effort here is to encourage you, to excite you in a healthy way, for you to go and say, that's an interesting teaching. I wonder where you got this from. That's why I give the sutta number. And so you go and look at it. And hopefully by that same token, you kind of get your appetite a little bit whetted so you can go into more explorations. You read a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then say, oh, and you find yourself in the suttas.
But then you say something about appetite, it just struck my mind that I guess the teachings will be something like the food for our inside.
That's a good analogy. Yes. You have to be hungry for the Dhamma. You have to be hungry for the Dhamma. Not for pretension or something like that, or to fit in, or to be like others. You have to really be thirsty for it. Why though? Something has to really jab you in the side, in the healthy way jab, to get you really to be moved. And suffering does that to us. So I was with, as I was saying earlier, with some cousins of mine, some of whom I hadn't seen for nearly 40 years. Long time. So that was the first time they were seeing me as a bhikkhu. They don't even have a concept, because, you know, I wasn't born as a Buddhist, very Christian, you know. And they were like, why? What made you, what drove you to become a monk? And I said, suffering. I appreciate suffering, you know. But not in the sense that I glorify it. No, I wanted to understand why there's suffering. Even as a child, when I was injured, I was this close to death. And the threat of death was long-lasting for almost 2 decades. Trauma. I wanted to understand, why do we suffer? Why is there death? Why is there uncertainty? Why can there not be any security in the world that was being presented to me? In the things enjoyable, in money, this, that, a home, food, it could always be taken away, and it does get taken away. So I wanted security, safety. And that's been the quest. That's why the Dhamma is the only thing that I encountered that does provide one with that safety. But there needs to be this driving thirst, which I was calling this morning chanda, which is that fervency of interest, of desire. Be inquisitive. So it's not for the dull-witted. And those are the ones who Lord Buddha calls putujjana, or usually translated as uneducated worldling, or a normal, ordinary person. They might have few PhDs, by the way. They might be CEOs of company. They might speak 6 or 7 languages, have Nobel Prizes, but they are still considered dumb as far as the Dhamma is concerned, because they live on the superficial level, putujjanas, versus someone else who penetrates deep, is curious. Why? Why is there suffering? Because when you ask why, genuinely you also want to know the cure for suffering. That's why. We don't glorify suffering. So yeah, you have to definitely be thirsty and with the appetite to eat the food. But you have to place the food. You have to open the door at least for the food to be brought in. Not pictures of food, because sometimes I see people looking at the menu and saying, aha, I was hungry, now I have eaten. No, you haven't. You just read the name of that food. That's what many of us do, metaphorically speaking. We read something and say, yeah, that is now inside of me. No, there's no understanding. Going through the motions does not secure awakening or freedom from suffering. It just suppresses it. So, but the person has to know it for oneself, and that's why Lord Buddha calls it paccattāng veditabbo viññuhi. It is to be realized. This path is supposed to be realized by the individual, the wise ones, them for themselves, by themselves. So that's why no one could give you awakening. No one. And if anyone says, come, I have now officiated you, you are now an arahant, or I'm giving you away, there's no such thing. You will know. I have seen people, I was in the presence of individuals where a teacher is saying to someone, based on information collecting from them, questions and answers, now you're a sotapanna. The person looked at the teacher, looked at me, looked at the teacher, looked at me, looked at the teacher, and said, but I don't feel it. Are you sure? And the person said, well, those answers are the right answers, so you must be a Sota or Sakadagami, a once returner. And then the person walks away scratching their head. Nothing has changed. Nothing has happened to them. Nonsense. There's no awakening there. The person, if they know, they know. If you're in love, you know you're in love. If someone comes and says, you don't need somebody's proof, basically, you will know. Awakening or seeing the Dhamma is exactly like that. A lot deeper, actually, not exactly, because it's a lot deeper. Right? Just to use that metaphor of being in love, not to trivialize Nibbana, but the person will know. It doesn't require convincing. That's why it's in the heart. So I agree with you. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Perfect timing.
Wonderful.